5-month pregnant mother. An accident. Months later, can the newborn's first cry wake her from her death-like sleep? And when the secret her father kept is revealed, how do their destinies change? Soon, truths and miracles come one after another. Sit back and enjoy this story. That morning in Mexico City, inside a small apartment on the 3rd floor of a simple building, Camila was pacing back and forth with her hands on her belly, feeling the gentle movements of the daughter growing inside her. She was 5 months pregnant. Javier, her husband, still did not know if it was a boy or a girl. They had agreed to wait together, but Camila couldn't stand it. At the last ultrasound, when the doctor smiled and whispered, "It's a girl," her heart almost leapt out of her chest. It was a girl. They were going to have a daughter, and now she wanted to tell him in a special way, her way. That morning she woke up early, even though her body was tired. She put on a light robe, tied her hair in a messy bun, and went to the kitchen to prepare something simple but full of love. The smell of warm bread and freshly brewed coffee soon filled her small home. On the table, she placed a lit candle, a plate of chopped fruit, and right in the center, a small white box with a pink bow. Inside the box was a tiny piece of clothing, light pink, with the words, "Daddy, I'm waiting for you," embroidered with fine thread. Next to it was an ultrasound photo with the date marked in red and a heart drawn with a pen. She ran her hand over her face, trying to hide the tears of emotion and nerves. Everything was ready. While she waited for Javier to come home from work, she sat down on the couch and began to talk to her baby. "Today, your dad is going to find out you're a girl, my love," she said softly, smiling. "He's going to be so happy. I'm sure he's going to cry, just like when he first heard you in the heartbeat." Time seemed to pass very slowly. Camila looked at the clock every minute. Her hands were sweating. She wanted to see his reaction, see the sparkle in his eyes, his smile, his big hug. She wanted to keep that moment in her heart forever. Finally, around 8 a.m., the door opened with a slight squeak. Javier walked in with his shoulders slumped, his eyes red from exhaustion, and his backpack hanging on one side. It had been a heavy shift, a difficult day, full of emergencies, people crying, screaming, pain everywhere. He wanted to take a shower, lie down in bed, and forget the world for a while. But as soon as he stepped into the living room, he sensed something different. The light was dimmer, softer. On the table was a simple dinner, but one made with great care. Warm bread, carefully chopped fruit, a glass of juice, and a lit candle, flickering slightly in the breeze coming in through the half-open window. And right in the center of the table was a small white box with a pink bow. Camila was standing there with a shy smile on her face, her hair tied back haphazardly, her apron stained with flour, and her 5-month baby bump very noticeable under her light dress. Javier stood at the door confused and moved at the same time. "Camila, what is all this?" he asked in surprise, taking off his backpack. She just smiled and pointed to the little box in the center of the table. "Open it, love." Javier approached, still hesitant, sat down slowly, and pulled the pink bow. When he opened the lid and saw the little clothes, he was silent for a few seconds, his eyes filled with tears. He took the small garment in his hands, as if it were made of glass. "Are we going to have a girl?" he asked, his voice breaking. Camila approached and placed her hand on his. "Yes, Javier, a girl, our Paola." His eyes filled with tears instantly. He brought his hand to his face, trying to hold back, but he couldn't. Tears ran down his face. He put the box on the table and hugged Camila tightly. "A girl," he repeated in a quiet voice. "My God, a daughter." He stood up, knelt in front of her belly, and kissed it slowly, lovingly, respectfully. "Hello, my little princess. Daddy already loves you so much. You have no idea." Camila cried silently, stroking his hair. That moment belonged to them, only them, a little piece of peace in the midst of the hustle and bustle of the world. "I knew you would be happy," she said between sobs. "Happy? I'm in heaven, Camila. In heaven. You gave me the best gift of my life. I don't even know how to thank you." He got up, wiped her face, and pulled up a chair for her. "Sit with me. Let's eat. I want to remember this day forever." Javier held the little pink clothes in his hands, as if they were a piece of a dream. He ran his fingers slowly over the fabric, looking at every detail, every seam, as if he wanted to keep that feeling forever. He smiled broadly, his eyes still full of tears, and looked at Camila, who watched him silently, her heart full of love. "Let's call her Paula," said Javier, his voice breaking but full of joy. Camila felt a warm glow in her chest. Paola was so simple, so beautiful, so full of life. She smiled and nodded yes, but inside she felt a small fear growing, a fear that even she couldn't explain. Javier got up from the chair, approached slowly, as if approaching something sacred, knelt in front of her, and placed his face on her round, warm belly, full of life. He closed his eyes and spoke softly, as if making a promise. "Paula, my little girl, Daddy is going to take care of you and your mommy with all the love in the world. You'll see." He kissed her belly affectionately, with devotion. Camila stroked his hair, feeling the deep connection that united the three of them. But behind that smile, her eyes showed a different gleam, a small shadow, almost invisible, but she knew it was there. She wanted so badly to tell Javier about that strange feeling she had been having the last few days. A discomfort, a little pain that sometimes appeared, but her fear of ruining such a beautiful moment was greater. She wanted to hold on to that happiness a little longer. She didn't want to worry anyone, not yet. So she smiled, a sincere smile, but one that hid a little tear. Javier didn't notice. He was too busy dreaming about the future, about the daughter he didn't know yet, but already loved with all his heart. Camila took a deep breath and held his hand tightly. "We're going to be very happy, Javier," she said, her voice full of emotion. He looked up and smiled back at her. "We already are, love. We already are." And at that moment, sitting at that simple table in their small apartment in Mexico City, they truly were. Life seemed perfect. The sun had not yet warmed the day when Camila decided to fix up an old box that was stored on top of the closet. It belonged to her mother, who had passed away a few years ago. During her pregnancy, she missed her even more. She wanted to feel her presence in some way, even if it was through the things she had left behind. She sat down on the living room floor, careful not to hurt her belly, and took out the mementos one by one. Yellowed photos, an antique brooch, birthday notes. At the bottom of the box, among folded papers, Camila found an envelope. It was somewhat crumpled, the ink already a little faded. It was from her mother. She recognized her handwriting as soon as she saw it. With her heart beating fast, she opened the envelope. Inside was a letter. Camila took a deep breath and began to read. The words, written with such feeling, seemed to speak directly to her, as if her mother were still there, sitting next to her. The letter said that there was a secret, something her mother never had the courage to tell her. It spoke of Camila's real father, a humble man of simple origins, whom she loved very much, but who, for fear of what his family would think, decided to distance himself. Her mother never told Camila the truth while she was alive. She raised her alone, carrying that secret in her heart all those years. Camila felt a tightness in her chest. She had always thought that her father had left because he wanted to. She never imagined that there was a hidden story, a truth kept silent. Her hands trembled as she held the paper. Emotion mixed with confusion clouded her mind. She read and reread the letter, searching for every detail, every clue. It contained the man's name and a small clue as to where he might be. A small town, not far from there. The address was incomplete, but it was something. She ran her hand over her face, trying to wipe away the tears, looked at her belly, and spoke softly, as if promising something to the daughter she was carrying inside her. "I need to know where I come from, so I can tell you, my love. You deserve to know your story." Camila sat there on the floor, hugging the letter to her chest. Part of her told her to forget it, to leave everything as it was, but another part, louder, screamed that she could no longer live without knowing the truth. And now, more than ever, her life was no longer her own. It also belonged to her daughter. She decided she was going to investigate. She was going to find out who her real father was, even if she didn't know what she was going to find. Even though fear gripped her heart. She got up slowly, hid the letter inside a book so no one would see it, and went to the window. The sky outside was still full of clouds, now even darker, heavy with rain like the day before. But inside her, the desire to move forward was even greater. She had to do it for herself, for her mother, and above all, for Paola. Something inside her told her she had to act fast. She wanted to go and come back before Javier woke up. She grabbed her car keys, slung her bag over her shoulder, and left with her heart racing. As she drove through the crowded streets of Mexico City, her thoughts were mixed. She thought about Paola. She thought about her mother. She thought about the man who was perhaps still alive somewhere, unaware that he had a daughter waiting to meet him. The traffic was heavy, horns blaring, engines roaring, people rushing across the street. Camila, with one hand on the steering wheel and the other caressing her belly, tried to stay calm. She spoke softly to her daughter, as if she could protect her with words alone. "Everything will be all right, my little one. We just need a little courage." At an intersection near downtown, while she was looking at the street names to try to find her way, the rain was now falling, obstructing her view. A car came speeding by on one side. Camila only had time to turn her face away. The impact was brutal. A loud crash, glass shattering, the car spinning on the asphalt like a toy thrown with force. Time seemed to stand still. Her head hit the glass hard. The bag flew inside the car. Everything became blurry, as if the world had lost its color. The smell of gasoline in the air, smoke coming out of the crushed hood, pieces of metal scattered across the street. People started screaming, people running from all directions. A man desperately knocked on the window, trying to see if she was still breathing. "Help! Call an ambulance!" a woman shouted as she talked to someone on the phone. Camila could barely open her eyes. The sound of voices came and went, as if she were underwater. Her stomach felt tight. She felt a strange pain in her chest, and she felt a fear greater than anything she had ever felt in her life. She tried to move her hand, but her body wouldn't respond. Tears rolled slowly down her injured face. She thought of Javier. She thought of Paola. She thought she couldn't end up like this. Not now. Not after everything. The ambulance arrived in a few minutes, but for her it was an eternity. The siren cut through the air. The doctors ran to the car, one of them wearing gloves, opened the crushed door with effort, and took her pulse. "She's alive!" he shouted to his colleagues. They quickly put a collar around her neck, immobilized her body, and took her out of the car as carefully as possible. Camila's face was pale and bruised. They put her on a stretcher, strapped her in with seatbelts, and lifted her into the ambulance. As the door slammed shut, a small glimmer of hope still shone in her eyes. Even though everything hurt, Camila knew deep down that she had to fight for herself, for her daughter, for the life that was just beginning. Javier woke up to a phone call. A paramedic was telling him about the accident. He froze. His heart was beating in his chest like never before. His legs went weak. He wanted to scream, cry, run to her, hold her, and tell her that everything was going to be okay. But his paramedic instincts were stronger. He took a deep breath, and with steady hands, he got up, changed his clothes, and ran out. He arrived at the hospital almost at the same time as the ambulance. Camila whispered, almost without a voice. She didn't respond. Her body looked so fragile, so distant. Javier grabbed her hand tightly, trying to pass on all the love he felt, trying to wake her up with his touch. Her hand was cold. A tear escaped from his eyes, but he quickly wiped it away with his shirt sleeve. He couldn't be her husband now. He had to be strong. He had to save them both. The colleagues around him were giving quick orders. "Low heart rate," shouted a nurse. "We have to stabilize her now," replied another. Javier followed every movement. The heart monitor beeped at a rhythm that grew weaker with each second. The contractions in her belly were even more worrying. Paola, little Paola, was still there, attached to a mother who was fighting to stay alive. "Please, my love, hang in there," he whispered, squeezing her hand again. They carefully gave her oxygen and medication. They did everything necessary to keep Camila stable. Javier didn't take his eyes off her for a second. Every beep of the machine was a battle won or lost, and inside him, fear mingled with faith. He knelt with his head bowed. "You promised we would be happy. You promised we would see our daughter grow up. So please, stay with us. Please." The doctors gently pulled him away. They asked him to leave. He stood at the door, watching everything from afar, unable to do anything. His chest hurt, as if it were being torn apart inside. The doctors worked quickly, performing tests and connecting more machines. Javier tried to understand the words they were saying, but it was as if the world had gone deaf. He could only see the face of the woman he loved, motionless, pale, so different from the lively Camila he knew. After a few minutes that seemed like hours, one of the doctors approached him, a serious man with tired eyes who had seen a lot of pain. "Mr. Javier, we need to talk." Javier jumped up, his heart beating wildly. "She's alive. My wife is alive, and my daughter." The doctor took a deep breath, as if he were carrying the weight of very difficult news on his shoulders. "The situation is very delicate. Your wife suffered a severe blow to the head. According to the tests, she has fallen into a coma." Javier felt his legs give way. He had to lean against the wall to keep from falling. "But what about the baby?" he asked, his voice trembling. "The baby is still alive," replied the doctor, looking him in the eye. "But her life depends on her mother's strength. We have to do everything we can to keep Camila stable until the end of the pregnancy. Every day is going to be a struggle." Javier closed his eyes, trying to hold back the tears. He couldn't break down there. "No, now I'm staying with her. I'm not leaving here. I promise you." The doctor just put his hand on his shoulder and nodded calmly before returning to the other doctors. Javier entered the room slowly. Camila was connected to many machines. The sounds of the machines filled the air. Rhythmic beeps, labored breathing, her heart beating to the rhythm of the wires and tubes. He approached the bed, pulled up a chair, and sat down next to her. He took her hand in his. She looked so small, so fragile, but she was still Camila, the woman he had fallen in love with in the square in the rain, the woman who now carried within her what they both dreamed of most, little Paola. Javier lowered his head. He rested his forehead on her hand and let the tears fall shamelessly, without fear. "Hang in there, love," he whispered, his voice breaking. "For us, for Paola. Don't leave me, please." Time seemed to have stopped inside that cold room. Only he, she, and the constant sound of the machines existed. Javier stayed there, speaking softly to her, promising love, strength, life, promising that he would be there every day, that she would not be alone, that he would not let go of her hand, no matter what happened. The hospital room became his home. The days were long and silent, with the smell of alcohol in the air and the sound of the machines marking the passage of time. Camila, still in a coma, remained connected to the machines, and inside her, Paola grew slowly, protected by a body that fought without saying a single word. The doctors assembled a special team. They made a difficult plan, full of care, vitamins in her oatmeal, controlled food, and daily tests. Every step was thought out not only to care for Camila, but also for the baby. Keeping them both alive was like holding a very thin thread that could break at any moment, and they knew it. From day one, Javier decided he would not leave. He brought a change of clothes and stayed. He slept on hard chairs, with his head resting on the edge of her bed. Sometimes he woke up with back pain, but he didn't complain. He just wanted to be close. At night, he would talk to Camila as if she could answer him. "Today, you moved your fingers, you know," he would say, smiling a little. "The doctor said it could be a reflex, but I know it was you trying to give me a sign." He spent hours by her side, holding her hand, stroking her hair, reading the books she liked. He played soft music on his cell phone, the kind she listened to when she was pregnant and dreaming of the future. At every ultrasound, the doctors showed that Paola was fine. She was small, but strong, as if she were everything her dad did, as if she knew she had to hold on, just like her mom. Javier wrote everything down in a notebook. Dates, feelings, thoughts. It was like a diary, a way to keep from going crazy in the midst of the pain. Sometimes he wrote while crying, sometimes he wrote while smiling at a memory, and every day, without fail, he said the same thing before going to sleep. "Good night, my love. We are here waiting for you to come back." The doctors were moved into silence. The nurses left little notes at the bedside with words of encouragement. Some even offered to cover shifts so that Javier could take a shower or go out for a walk. But he never strayed far for long. He said that room was where he felt closest to Camila. A month passed, then 2. The seasons changed outside, but inside, everything remained the same. Javier lived on weak coffee, stale bread, and hope. She was small, but strong, as if she could hear everything her dad said. When night came, and the hospital grew quieter, Javier pulled the chair close to the bed, turned off the main light, and left only the lamp on, softly illuminating Camila's face. Every day, at the same time, he performed the same ritual. He played soft music, the kind they listened to together when they were in the car, coming home from work, or going to visit his mother-in-law. He grabbed a thin blanket, settled down next to her, and with all the calm in the world, he began to talk. He leaned over carefully, brought his face close to her large, round belly, where Paola was growing, protected, and there, with his head almost resting on her belly, he talked as if he were telling stories to 2 people at the same time, to the daughter he had not yet met, and to the woman he loved so much, but who slept in a silence that hurt. "Your mom is strong, Paola," he whispered in a low, firm voice, but full of emotion. "She's going to wake up, I know it." He would remain silent for a few seconds, perhaps waiting for a response that never came, but inside, he felt that those words were reaching somewhere. He kept talking, even though his eyes were filled with tears. "And you're going to be strong too, my love. You're going to be born, beautiful and healthy. And one day I'm going to tell you everything that happened here, how brave your mom was, and how much we waited for you." Sometimes he would put his hand on her belly and close his eyes, and when he felt a slight movement, a tiny kick, he would smile. "I knew you were listening. It's your way of saying I'm here, Daddy, right?" Time seemed to stand still in there. While the world outside continued in its rush, inside that room there was a man, a woman in silence, and a life that beat insistently, full of hope. Javier talked about everything, the letters he was writing, the plans he had for when Camila woke up. He told stories about the beginning of their courtship, the walks they took hand in hand, the rain that surprised him one afternoon, and every night ended the same. He kissed Camila's belly and said, "Good night, Paola. Good night, my love. I'm here. I'll always be here." And so it went on night after night, alone but full of love, talking to the silence, taking care of both of them with words that came from the bottom of his soul. The days continued to be the same, and at the same time, each one was different. 7 months had already passed since the beginning of the pregnancy. One night, quieter than others, he had an idea. He grabbed his cell phone, placed it in a small box near the bed, sat down next to Camila, and pressed the record button. He wanted to record a video. "Hello, Paulita." He began with a sad smile on his lips. "Today is another day that I am here with your mom. She is asleep, but I am talking to you both, as always." He took a folded piece of paper with worn edges out of his pocket. It was one of many letters she had written since Camila fell into that endless silence. He opened it carefully and began to read in a low, broken voice. "Camila, my love, today I missed you in a different way. I went to the window and imagined you laughing, tossing your hair, complaining about the heat. I felt your scent in my memory. I closed my eyes and could almost hear you calling me." He paused for a moment, wiped his eyes, took a deep breath, and continued. "I love you so much. And our daughter. I think our daughter is already responding when I talk to her. You would love to see how she moves. She is getting strong just like you." When he finished reading the letter, he looked at his cell phone. "Paola, when you grow up, you will see these videos. You'll know that your dad never lost hope, that your mom was a warrior, that the 3 of us were a family, even if it was in silence." In the days that followed, he made a habit of it. He recorded a video every day. In each one, he read a letter. Sometimes he showed a toy he had bought. Other times he just talked about love. Sometimes he cried while recording, but he didn't stop. He wanted Paola to know who Camila was. He wanted her to hear the tone of her voice as she recounted everything she felt. He recorded how they found out about the pregnancy. He recorded even the little everyday stories, the ones that seemed silly, but were actually the ones that make up life. At the hospital, some of the nurses began to notice. They would pass by the room, glance sideways, and some even cried hidden in the hallway because they knew that what Javier was doing wasn't just to pass the time. It was love, turned into memories. Time continued its slow and painful journey inside that hospital room. The nurses already knew Javier well, but one of them, Ana, took a special liking to him and his whole story of love and struggle. Ana was a woman with a big heart and an easy smile, but her eyes carried an old sadness, like someone who already knew the pains of life well. At first, she just did her job, changing IVs, adjusting equipment, bringing medicine, but as the days passed, it was impossible not to get involved. She saw Javier every night talking to Camila and her belly, recording videos, reading letters, clinging to a hope that seemed greater than his own exhaustion. One afternoon, while changing the bedsheets, Ana stood next to Javier, who was sitting with a distant look in his eyes. "You're very strong, Javier," she said in a soft, low voice. "Few men would do what you are doing." He smiled wearily, but full of love. "I'm not strong, Ana. I'm just fulfilling my promise to her. I told her I would be by her side, and here I am." Ana felt her eyes fill with tears, but she hid them by adjusting the blanket. "And you're going to keep doing it, because she feels it. It may not seem like it, but she feels it." From then on, Ana began to show up more often in the room, even when it wasn't her shift. Sometimes she brought Javier a hot cup of coffee. Other times she left little notes with words of encouragement on the nightstand. Small gestures that for Javier were like silent hugs in the middle of the storm. "When you get tired, you can rest for a little while, Javier. I'll stay here with her," Ana would offer with a sincere smile. But Javier always politely declined. "Thank you, Ana, but I need to be here. I want her to open her eyes and see me as the first person." Ana respected that. She admired that strength that neither time nor pain could extinguish. She saw how he talked to Camila every day, how he caressed Paola's belly, how he played soft music to keep the room full of life. And even though the doctor came to give them difficult news, saying that Camila's condition had not changed, Javier just bowed his head, took a deep breath, and then went back to her. It was around 2 a.m. when something terrifying happened. Javier was nodding off with his head resting on the edge of the bed, as he always did. One hand held Camila's hand, and the other rested on her belly, where Paola slept peacefully, embraced by the warmth of her mother's body. The room was silent. Only the sound of the machines marking the rhythm of Via could be heard. Suddenly, a sharp noise cut through the air, a beep louder than the others. Javier opened his eyes wide and looked straight at the monitor. Camila's heart was slowing down. The numbers began to fall slowly, and the red lights began to flash. No, please," he said, jumping out of his chair with tears on his face. The alarm sounded. Nurses and doctors rushed running into the room. They gently pushed Javier outside and closed the door. He stood outside with his hands over his face, listening to the sounds of the machines, the doctors shouting for medicine, the quick footsteps. The feeling of helplessness was like a punch in the chest. "Hang in there, Camila. Hang in there, please." The hallway spun around him. Ana arrived, put her hand on his shoulder, and tried to say something, but he wasn't listening. All he could think was that maybe he was losing them both, that maybe this was the end, and he couldn't bear it. After a few minutes that seemed like hours, the door opened. The doctor came out to him with a serious expression, but with a little relief in his eyes. "We managed to stabilize her. It was a close call, Javier. She's still in a coma, but she's stable." Javier let himself fall into a chair. His whole body was shaking. His hands were sweating. His heart was beating fast, as if to compensate for the shock. He cried. It wasn't loud crying. It was quiet crying. Pain that had been bottled up for a long time. He didn't sleep again that night. He sat next to Camila, watching her for hours, trying to understand what was still keeping everything together. He grabbed the notebook where he wrote his letters and began to write again, but this time he wrote for himself. "I need to know who you are, Camila. I need to understand everything. I can't live in this emptiness anymore." That near loss caused something to change inside him. Fear now had a different weight. It was no longer just the fear of losing Camila. It was the fear of continuing without knowing where she came from, what she kept in her heart, what she wanted to tell him before the accident. He thought about the letter from his mother, which was among his things. He thought about his father, who might still be alive somewhere in the world. That morning, with his heart still racing, Javier made a decision. He wasn't going to wait any longer. He needed answers, not only for himself, but also for Camila. She was looking for someone. She was going after something important on the day everything happened, and he had to finish that journey for her. He returned home after many days in the hospital. He went straight to the room, searched Camila's bag for the papers she kept so much care, and there, among loose notes and messages, he found the name of a woman written in quick handwriting, Doña Lourdes, midwife. Next to it was a poorly written address. The next day, Javier went there. It was a simple house in the countryside, with a wooden terrace and flower pots at the entrance. He rang the bell, his heart racing. A lady with white hair and deep blue eyes came to the door. She had a sweet look, but she seemed to immediately recognize the pain in Javier's eyes. "Are you Doña Lourdes?" he asked in a low voice. "I am, son. How can I help you?" Javier took a photo of Camila out of his pocket, still a little girl in her mother's arms, and showed it to her. Javier took a photo of Camila out of his pocket, still a little girl in her mother's arms. "She is my wife, Camila. She is in a coma, and before the accident, she used to come here. You helped her when she was born." Doña Lourdes put her hand to her mouth, took a deep breath, and asked him to come in. They sat down in the living room. Javier told her everything about the accident, about the pregnancy, about Camila's silence. The woman listened quietly, moving her fingers slowly on her lap. "I remember her. I remember her well. Her mother, Teresa, was a good woman, but she suffered a lot. She called me one night in despair, saying that she was going to have her daughter alone, that she couldn't tell her family or the man who was the girl's father." Javier remained silent, waiting. It was a hidden love, Javier. Teresa fell in love with a simple, poor boy from the countryside. Her family did not accept him. They said that if she didn't leave him, they would kick her out of the house. And she, afraid, chose silence. She had the girl in secret and registered her under her last name. She never told anyone who the father was. Javier's eyes filled with tears. It was as if he was slowly beginning to understand the emptiness that Camila had always felt, that sadness that sometimes came over her without explanation. "And that man?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Is he still alive?" "As far as I know, yes. His name is Ernesto. He lives on a small farm at the end of the old road. He lives alone. He never married. He has no children. He is a farmer. He is a good man." "Is he still alive?" "As far as I know, yes. His name is Ernesto. He lives on a small farm at the end of the old road. He lives alone. He never married. He has no children. He is a farmer. He is a good man. He always felt ashamed for leaving Teresa, but it was she who asked him to leave." Javier thanked with a look full of emotion, took the address on a piece of paper, and left with a heavy heart. Now he knew. Camila was looking for her dad yet on the day of the accident. She was looking for a part of herself that had been lost in the past. Javier followed the dirt roads, his eyes glued to the road and his heart. The sun was setting when he arrived at a small farm in the countryside, surrounded by old trees and chickens roaming the yard. The house was simple, made of old wood, with an old bench on the porch. Sitting there with a hat on his head and his gaze lost on the horizon was Don Ernesto. Javier stopped the car, got out slowly, and approached respectfully. "Are you Don Ernesto?" The man looked up, his face marked by time, his white beard unkempt, and the sad look of someone who carries great sadness. "That's me. Who's asking?" Javier took the same photo out of his pocket that he had shown to Doña Lourdes. It was Camila, still a baby, in her mother's arms. He held out the photo with trembling hands. "She is my wife, Camila. Your daughter." Don Ernesto was paralyzed. He took the photo carefully, as if it were something very sacred. His eyes began to shine, and his voice came out softly. "Camila, my God, she's okay." Javier took a deep breath. He knew that this conversation was going to be painful for both of them. "She's in a coma. She had an accident. She is 7 months pregnant. Your granddaughter is still fighting to be born." Don Ernesto brought his hand to his face and cried. He cried like a child who had held back tears for a long time. The shame he had carried for so many years finally came out. "I should have gone to look for her. I should have fought. But Teresa asked me to leave. She told me it was for the best, that her family hated me, and I believed her. I thought that because I was poor, because I had nothing, I had no right. Javier sat down next to him, his eyes filled with emotion. Camila came to look for you on the day of the accident. She wanted to meet you. She wanted to understand who you were. I know there's still time. She can't hear, but maybe she can feel. She needs you now. Don Ernesto looked at the floor, wiping his tears with his large hands, marked by hard work in the fields. He was silent for a few seconds, then stood up with a determined look on his face. Take me to her, please. I don't want to run away anymore. I want to help. I want to ask for forgiveness, even if she can never hear me. Javier nodded and put his hand on his shoulder. The two looked at each other, and in that look there was pain, regret, but also the beginning of healing. This man, who had spent his entire life hiding from shame, was now taking the first step toward the daughter he never knew, not with flowers or pretty words, but with an open heart, ready to be with her and the granddaughter who was about to be born. Because sometimes love comes late, but when it truly arrives, it can still change everything. The next day, still wearing his farmer's clothes and with a heavy heart, Don Ernesto returned to the city with Javier. They made the journey in silence. All that could be heard was the sound of the car on the road, and, from time to time, the deep sound of the crying he was trying to hold back. The man who had spent his life in silence now felt an urgency within him, as if time were running out. When they arrived, Javier explained that Camila needed one more treatment, something that would help protect her brain, something that could increase the chances of her responding, but it was expensive, and the hospital did not offer it. Don Ernesto listened to everything in silence, and without thinking twice, he went out into the streets with a sign in his hands, written in shaky letters. My daughter is in a coma. I'm trying to help her live. Any help is welcome. He stood in front of the subway, then in a busy square, then in front of a church. He spent hours there. Sun, wind, hunger, and yet he did not move. Many people passed by without looking at him. Others gave him coins without asking any questions. But some stopped, read the sign, and cried with him. One woman took his hand and said, "May God give you strength. Your daughter will feel that love, even in her condition." With what he managed to collect that day, he returned to the hospital with Javier. He handed every penny to the doctor with trembling hands. "It may not be much, but it's all I have. Please take care of my little girl." The doctor was moved and promised that they would do everything they could with what they had. Javier then took Don Ernesto to Camila's room. They stood at the door. The old man took a deep breath, as if the air had been stuck for years. He entered slowly, took off his hat, and approached the bed. There was the daughter he never saw grow up, her hair scattered on the pillow, her face pale, her body motionless, but still fighting. Don Ernesto knelt beside her. Carefully, he took Camila's hand in his and pressed his forehead against hers. "My daughter," he whispered, his voice breaking. Forgive me for not being here before, for letting you grow up without knowing who I was. Forgive me for being a coward." He cried softly, as if the words he hadn't said in 30 years were finally coming out of his heart. "I'm here now, and I'm not going to leave your side. I promise you that." Javier, leaning against the door, was also crying. That moment was more than a reunion. It was an attempt at repair, a way to give Camila, even if only silently, what she had been looking for on the day when everything stopped. Don Ernesto kissed his daughter's hand, closed his eyes, and stood there in silence, as if his heart were saying everything his voice could no longer say. Time passed like a heavy sigh. Each day was a silent victory. Camila was still in a coma, but she was holding on. Her belly grew, and with it, hope. The pregnancy was almost 9 months along. No one could explain how, but even in that state, Camila managed to carry her daughter to term. The doctors looked at each other with respect, almost in silence, like people who know they are facing something that science cannot explain. That morning, the room was quiet. Javier arranged the blanket as he always did, and spoke to Camila in the same sweet voice he used every day. "You did it, my love. 9 whole months. Look what we achieved." That's when Camila moved a little. Nothing big, a small sigh. But immediately Javier felt a warm liquid wet the sheet. He looked down in alarm, saw the wet mattress, and understood immediately. Her water had broken. "Doctors, call the doctors now!" he shouted desperately. Within seconds, nurses and doctors rushed in. Anna also arrived, already wearing gloves, with a serious look on her face. One of the doctors looked at Javier with a firm gaze. "The time has come. The delivery has to be now." Javier held Camila's hand, trembling, but she is still in a coma, and that is why it is so delicate, Javier. We're going to do everything with the utmost care, but we can't wait any longer. The baby's life depends on it, and so does the mother's. They took Camila to the operating room. Javier went with them to the door, but he had to stay outside. He paced back and forth with sweaty palms, and his eyes glued to the door handle. Don Ernesto arrived just in time, approached slowly, and put his hand on his son-in-law's shoulder. "They're going to make it. Both of them are going to make it." Javier just nodded, squeezing his eyes shut to keep from crying. Outside, everything was silent, and inside, the doctors were getting ready, checking the baby's vital signs, Camila's blood pressure, and the heartbeats of both hearts. They began the delivery with the utmost care. It was a very big risk. They didn't know how Camila's body would react, but it had to be done. Paola was ready to be born, and life would not wait. Javier leaned his forehead against the wall with his eyes closed and his fists clenched. He prayed in silence. He prayed with all his heart. "Please, God, just one more miracle. Just one more." The clock seemed to slow down, each second a weight on his chest. And there, in the cold hallway of that hospital, a father and a grandfather waited for the most important moment of their lives. After all the preparations were made, the operating room was silent, though full of people, nurses, doctors, and machines turned on. Everyone knew that this wasn't just another birth. It was a fight between life and hope. Javier was allowed to enter, and he did so in sterile clothing, trembling but determined. He held Camila's hand tightly, as if that touch were a rope he couldn't let go of. Camila, although in a coma, was receiving all the care she needed. The contractions were induced very calmly, following every heartbeat, every signal. Her body reacted slowly, as if trying to remember how to bring a child into the world without being awake. Javier approached her head. He kissed her forehead affectionately and whispered in her ear, "Are you doing this, love? Our daughter is coming. You're being so strong." Outside the room, Don Ernesto, his eyes filled with tears, was thinking. His hands were clasped together, praying silently. His daughter in a hospital bed, his granddaughter about to be born. It was too much for one heart. The labor was long and tense. The medical team spoke carefully, their eyes steady, but there was emotion in every movement. It was as if they were all there, not just as professionals, but as people cheering with all their hearts until the cry came. A loud, lively sound, as if the baby was saying, "I'm here." The doctor lifted little Paola into the air. She was delicate, with reddish skin, her eyes closed, her little body still covered in birth mucus, but she was crying loudly. Javier's soul broke. He cried uncontrollably, covered his face with his hands, knelt beside Camila, and thanked God, the universe, and his own daughter. He cried out of love, relief, everything. And then it happened. The moment Paola's cry filled the room, the monitors connected to Camila began to sound different. First slowly, then louder. A new rhythm, a reaction. "Something is changing," said a surprised nurse. The doctor quickly looked at the monitor, and his eyes sparkled with amazement. "She's responding." Javier jumped up, tears still streaming down his face, and looked at Camila. Her hand, which had not been moving before, stirred slightly. Her eyes began to flutter beneath her closed eyelids. "Camila, it's me, love. Listen to our daughter. She's here. It's okay," he said in a trembling voice. Other doctors rushed over. Fear and hope were in the air. Javier moved even closer to the bed, holding Paola in his arms, pressing her against his chest, trying to understand what was happening. "Do you know what's wrong with her?" he asked, his eyes filled with tears. "Camila is trying to react. but we don't know if her body will hold up," replied one of the doctors, swallowing hard. The silence in the room was broken by the anticipation. All eyes were on her. Camila, motionless for so many months, was beginning to show signs that something inside her was still fighting. Her face moved slowly, a muscle. Then her eyelids fluttered slightly, as if she were trying to wake up from a confusing dream. "Love, can you hear me?" Javier asked, kneeling beside the bed. With effort, as if drawing strength from the depths of her soul, Camila opened her eyes. Small, tired, cloudy. She blinked slowly, trying to understand where she was. Her gaze scanned the room until it stopped on Javier, and then she heard the sound that pierced everything, the cry of her daughter. The sound entered deep into her ears, like a light breaking through the darkness, and at that moment, a tear fell from Camila's eyes. Soft, silent, full of feeling. Javier, sobbing, went to the nurse and took the baby. His hands were shaking. He stood up carefully and brought his daughter close to Camila's face, carrying her little body, still wrapped in the white blanket. "Look at her, my love. She's our daughter. Paola, she's here. She cried for you." Camila couldn't speak, but her eyes said it all. She looked at her daughter's little face as if she were seeing a miracle. Emotion filled the hearts of everyone there. No words were needed. That encounter alone moved the hand with difficulty, almost without strength. But Javier understood, took her hand, and placed it on the baby's little body. Camila touched her, a light touch, but full of life. Paola's crying stopped, as if she could feel it too, as if she recognized her mother's warmth. Paola's touch seemed to awaken something very deep in Camila. Slowly, as if learning to live again, she moved the fingers of her hand. First one, then another. Javier saw it, and quickly approached, his heart that was almost bursting out of his chest. He knelt down next to her, holding that fragile hand tightly, and resting his forehead on Camila's, feeling her breath, still weak but alive. "You're here. I promised you, my love," he whispered softly, his voice breaking with emotion. Camila closed her eyes for a second, as if gathering strength inside her chest, and then, in an effort so beautiful it broke his heart, she tried to smile. A tiny, shy smile, but so full of life that it seemed to light up the whole room. Tears streamed down her face without stopping. It was not a cry of pain, it was a cry of love, of relief, of reunion. Her eyes still heavy, focused on the most beautiful scene she could see. Javier holding Paola in his arms. The baby was still dirty from the birth, wrapped in a white blanket, with red skin and hair stuck to her forehead. Camila looked at them as if she were looking at a miracle. She tried to stretch out her arm, but she still didn't have the strength, so she just cried, conveying everything she felt through that look. Javier, with all the care in the world, brought Paola close to her face, placed the baby's little nose in Camila's hand, and there, in that simple gesture, the three of them found each other. Mother, father, and daughter, united by something that cannot be explained, only felt. "She waited for you, Camila, just as I waited for you," said Javier, his voice trembling. "We are together. We are complete." Camila closed her eyes again, smelling her daughter's scent, feeling the warmth of love that filled the air. And although she couldn't say anything, her expression said it all. Gratitude, love, strength. The days that followed were filled with silence mixed with hope. Camila was still weak, but something inside her was not the same. Her eyes remained open, alert, and from time to time a shy smile appeared at the corner of her mouth when she heard Javier's voice or Paola's soft cries. It was as if she were coming back little by little, a little bit each day. Javier never left her side, caring for the baby and the mother with the same love, with the same patience. He changed diapers, bathed Paola with trembling hands, and then ran back to the room with his daughter in his arms, just so she could be close to her mother for a little while. He brought Paola close to Camila's chest, who still didn't have the strength to hold her, but let the tears fall every time she felt her daughter's warmth on her chest. One day, while Anna was changing Camila's bandages, she noticed something different. Camila tried to move her mouth. Her tongue felt heavy. Her lips were slow to react, but she was trying. Javier quickly got up from the couch and ran over. "Camila, do you want to say something?" She blinked slowly, as if to say yes. Javier took her hand and leaned even closer, waiting to hear any sound, any sigh. The room fell silent until, with great effort, a slurred word came out of her mouth, weak but complete. Paola. Time stood still. Javier opened his eyes wide, and tears rolled down his cheeks. At that very moment, Ana covered her mouth, unable to hold back her tears. One of the doctors, who was just entering the room, stood in the doorway and bowed his head emotionally. She spoke, said Javier, his voice trembling, kneeling beside the bed. "You said her name, my love." Camila closed her eyes for a moment, tired from the effort, but smiling. It was the most sincere, most beautiful smile, full of truth. Javier looked at Paola in the crib next to her and said between sobs, "She called you, daughter. Your mom called you," with the first word that came from her heart after so long. The crying that filled that room was not out of sadness. It was the crying of someone witnessing a miracle, a rebirth, the crying of someone who saw life begin again in a simple way, with a single word, a word that now carried all the meaning in the world. Paola. The room was quiet that afternoon. Camila was already stronger, sitting up with help, with pillows arranged behind her back, and Paola sleeping peacefully in the crib next to her. Her face still showed the exhaustion of everything she had been through, but her eyes were filled with something new, life, strength, hope. Then the door opened slowly. Javier entered first, holding the hand of an elderly man, with slow steps and a heavy gaze. It was Don Ernesto. His feet seemed to weigh more than his body. The crumpled hat in his hands trembled a little. Camila looked, took a few seconds, and then opened her eyes wide. She knew that face. It was the same one in the old portrait in her mother's letter, the same gaze she had tried to imagine every night since she discovered the truth. She fell silent, her chest tight. Don Ernesto stopped a few steps from the bed. He bowed his head, his voice trembling, full of sorrow for so many lost years. "Camila, it's me. I should have come sooner. I should have been a father. I have no excuses. I only ask, if possible, that you forgive me. Even if you never call me Dad, I just want you to know that I never stopped thinking about you. I always loved you, even from afar." The silence that fell there was stronger than any words. Camila didn't answer, but her eyes filled with tears. Her chest rose and fell as if she were carrying the world inside her. She stretched out her arms with difficulty, and Don Ernesto approached her. They hugged slowly, and there, in that embrace, all the weight of the past fell away. She cried without saying anything. So did he. They cried for everything they hadn't experienced, for all the missed birthdays, for every dad she never said, for every daughter he kept only in his thoughts. And Javier, standing nearby, wiped his tears with a handkerchief, knowing he was witnessing another miracle. In the days that followed, life began to settle down. Camila, although still weak, regained her voice, her movement, her will. Javier continued to record his videos, but now he was no longer alone in the images. Camila appeared at his side, smiling with Paola in her arms, reading the old letters he wrote every night. The videos were no longer just about pain. Now they were about overcoming, about starting over. Each recording was a little piece of healing. They showed Camila's small steps forward, the first glances with her daughter, the shy giggles between her and Javier, Don Ernesto's advice in the background, talking about the land, about the simple life, about regrets that turned into courage. It was on a quiet afternoon, one of those when the sun shines through the window and warms the hospital floor, that Ana decided to sit next to Camila while she slept with Paola in her arms. Camila was already stronger, smiling more often, and the room, which had previously been filled with silence and pain, now seemed full of life with the soft sound of the videos that Javier continued to record. Ana sat down slowly in the chair next to the bed, with a glass of tea in her hands, and stayed there for a while, just watching. Javier was standing up, adjusting a blanket over Camila's feet, when he realized that she had a different look, a distant look. like someone who has been keeping a story to themselves for a long time. "Are you okay, Anna?" he asked affectionately. She smiled a little, looked at him, and then looked back at Camila, who was stroking Paola's hair very carefully. "Yes, I just never thought I'd live to see something like this again," she replied in a low voice. Javier approached her curiously, but respecting her time. Anna took a deep breath, and after a moment began to speak. "A few years ago, I lost a child. He was still small, a quick infection. When I realized it, he was no longer with me. I could never forgive myself, even though I knew it wasn't my fault. That took a piece of me, a piece that never came back." She paused, her eyes shining, but still smiling. "After that, I thought about quitting nursing. I thought I never would have the strength to care for someone again, but I kept going for him. And when Camila arrived here, I saw in her something I can't explain, a strength, a peace. And when she woke up, it was as if a part of me woke up too." Camila, who had been listening quietly, gently took Anna's hand. "Thank you," she said in a low but firm voice, "for never giving up on me." Anna held back her tears, but one escaped. She leaned over, kissed Camila's forehead, and squeezed her hand affectionately. "You brought me back, you, Javier, and this beautiful little thing," she said, looking at Paola, who was now sleeping peacefully in her mother's arms. Javier was moved. He looked at the two women there, so different, but now united by something much greater, and he thought that life, even though it seems to take everything away from you, always finds a way to give you something back, even if it's just a little bit of hope each time. That day they were not just patient, nurse, husband, mom. They were people healing each other with simple words, with silences that said a lot, with love in small gestures. Because sometimes that is what saves us, knowing that we are not alone, that after the pain there is still life, there is still a new beginning. Days later, the gate to the building opened slowly, and Camila got out of the car with Paola in her arms, wrapped in a soft blanket that Anna had sewn by hand. Javier was walking beside her, carrying bags with the baby's things, and Don Ernesto was behind them, carrying a simple bouquet of wildflowers picked by the side of the road. When the neighbors saw Camila arrive, they began to come out of their houses one by one. The lady on the third floor brought an apple pie. The girl from the little store ran to get balloons. Even the doorman, Don Ramiro, who hardly ever spoke, appeared with a cloth banner with crooked letters that read, "Welcome, Camila and Paola." Camila tried to smile, but her eyes filled with tears. The emotion was too much to bear. After so many months, after so much struggle, she was back home again with her daughter in her arms and her heart full of mixed feelings. They slowly climbed the stairs. Each step felt heavy, not because of physical exhaustion, but because of the weight of everything she had left behind. Upon entering the apartment, Camila smelled her home, saw the pictures on the walls, the jars in the kitchen, everything the same, yet everything different. Javier opened the windows to let in light. He put on soft music playing. The atmosphere was calm and cozy, but Camila, sitting on the couch with Paola asleep in her arms, felt something she couldn't explain. It was like being happy and scared at the same time, as if her mind were searching for pieces of her that hadn't returned. At night, when silence filled the house, she cried silently. Javier noticed, sat down next to her, and held her hand. "You don't have to hide it. I'm here, Camila. You can cry. You can talk. You can just stay quiet. I'm not going to leave your side." She rested her head on his shoulder and whispered in a broken voice, "Sometimes I close my eyes, and everything comes back. The accident, the darkness, the distant voices, and then just emptiness. And now I'm here with our daughter, and I feel incomplete, as if part of me is still there in that hospital." Javier hugged her tightly, and Paola, in her crib next to them, made a little noise as if she also felt her mother's pain and wanted to hug her. "We're going to get through this together, one day at a time. You're back, you're here, and we'll rebuild the rest." Camila closed her eyes, letting the tears fall silently. She knew that the road was still long, that not everything would come back at once. But there, in Javier's arms, with her daughter sleeping beside her, she felt that she was in the right place. Again, for the first time. The sun was shining brightly that day, and a gentle breeze was blowing through the streets of the city. Camila, still walking slowly, decided to go out for a while with Paola. Javier wanted to go with them, but she preferred to have a moment alone with her daughter, as a little test for herself that she could go back to living as before. She grabbed Paola in the stroller, took an umbrella in her hand, and walked to the little park near her house. Children were playing, mothers were chatting on the benches, and Paola was sleeping peacefully, moving to the gentle rhythm of the stroller. Camila looked around and smiled. It was as if, for a few minutes, everything was normal again. She sat down on a wooden bench and began to observe everything, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face. But suddenly, the world spun. The ground seemed to move away from her feet. Her head felt heavy, and a strange buzzing filled her ears. She tried to call out to someone. She tried to grab the stroller, but everything went dark. Her body fell sideways onto the bench as people rushed to help her. Paola began to cry, frightened by the confusion. A woman grabbed the stroller, and soon an ambulance was called. At the hospital, after several tests, the doctors brought the news that Javier feared most. Part of Camila's brain was still very sensitive. The impact of the accident had left her with lasting effects. She could live normally most of the time, but she might never be the same again. She needed a lot of rest, no exertion, no strong emotions, no desire to make up for lost time. Camila listened to everything in silence. She just lowered her head, clutching the bedsheets tightly. When they were alone in the room, she turned on her side and cried quietly, without making a sound, as if she didn't want anyone to see her, as if this time she no longer had the strength to pretend she was brave. While she cried, Javier packed her things into a makeshift suitcase. It was then that he found a crumpled, half-torn piece of paper among his clothes. It was the letter from Camila's mother, the one she had found before everything happened. The writing was already half erased, but it was still legible. He sat on the edge of the bed, picked up the paper very carefully, and began to read aloud, his voice firm but full of love. "Daughter, you are made of a strength you do not yet know. You came into the world to win, to love, to make your own story. When you are afraid, remember, the blood that runs through you is blood of courage. You are the best part of me. Never forget that." Camila turned to look at him with eyes swollen from crying so much. Javier took her hand and said very slowly, "You don't have to be like you were before. You just have to be you. And that's more than enough for me and for our Paola." Camila let a few more tears escape, but this time they were mixed with a small smile. But really, she knew it wouldn't be easy. But she knew she wasn't alone. And deep in her heart, that letter from her mother seemed to have arrived just in time, like a hug traveling through time to remind her that even though she was broken, she was still whole, and that she still had a lot to live for. After that difficult day at the hospital, Camila returned home determined. She looked at Paola asleep in her crib, and Javier sound asleep, which gave her courage, and she took a deep breath. It was no use wanting to be who she was before. She had to learn to be who she was now, to start over calmly, with patience, with love. She started with simple things. She asked Javier to teach her again how to make breakfast in a lighter way, dividing things into easier tasks. Each step seemed small, but for her it was a great victory. Sometimes she made mistakes, spilled the milk, burned the bread a little, and laughed at herself with that shy smile that Javier loved so much. With Paola, she also discovered herself as a mother. Once again, she learned to change diapers slowly, without rushing. She learned to hold the bottle with both hands, trembling a little at first, and to sing softly songs she didn't even remember knowing. Every caress, every act of care, she did with a tenderness that moved anyone who saw her. Javier, as always, recorded everything from the first time Camila managed to get Paola to burp on her own. He recorded the laughter, the little mistakes, the moments when she hugged her daughter with tears in her eyes, happy to be managing to live day by day. The videos were simple, without editing or pretty settings, just life passing by in the most authentic way. Javier uploaded everything to the internet without much intention, just to save those precious memories. But one day, something unexpected happened. One of the videos where Camila, her hand still shaking, prepares porridge for Paola while singing softly, went viral. Millions of people saw it, commented on it, shared it, and were moved by it. People from all over the world began to write letters, send messages, and tell how that story had changed their lives. People who had lost someone found comfort in seeing Camila fight. Mothers who were starting over after illnesses. Men and women who, seeing her strength, regained hope. Camila, moved, read the messages with shining eyes. One of them said, "You taught me that life can be beautiful, even if it's made of little pieces." Javier hugged her tightly and whispered, "You see, my love, you're not only rebuilding your life, you are also helping to rebuild the lives of many people." Camila smiled, hugged Paola tightly in her arms, and for the first time in a long time, she felt a beautiful peace inside her chest. She was no longer the same as before, and that was okay, because in the end, that's what life is all about. Starting over, about love, and about having the courage to be happy. Even after the pain, the home phone rang one afternoon with clear skies and a gentle breeze. Javier answered, and then looked at Camila with a different smile. It was a special invitation. A local television program had seen the videos he uploaded and wanted to tell her story to more people. Camila, shy, hesitated. Her heart was beating fast with fear. She still felt fragile. She still carried insecurities. She still trembled at the thought of showing herself. But Javier took her hand and said with his usual calm, "You don't have to be perfect, love. You just have to be yourself, in your own way, as you have already touched so many people without realizing it." Camila took a deep breath, looked at Paola playing with a colorful toy on the floor, and smiled at her daughter, at everything she had been through, at all the battles she had won in silence. She decided to accept. On the day of the interview, Camila put on a simple dress, did her hair with Anna's help, and even though her hands were sweating, she entered the recording studio with her head held high. Paola stayed in Javier's arms, who looked at her with pride that he couldn't contain. The lights were bright, the cameras were a little scary, but when the presenter smiled and asked, "Camila, what would you say to someone who feels today that they won't be able to move forward?" She closed her eyes for a second, as if searching within her heart for the most sincere answer, and then, her voice still weak and hoarse but full of determination, she spoke. "Never stop believing, even if everything seems lost." Those words came out like a warm hug, simple but so full of truth that the entire studio fell silent. Even the presenter, who had heard so many stories in his life, had tears in his eyes. Camila continued, "I thought I had lost everything. I thought I would never open my eyes again. But today, seeing my daughter, my husband, and all those who helped me, I see that life always finds a way to blossom, even when we think it's all over." She smiled shyly, and Javier, carrying Paola, couldn't hold back his tears. It was like seeing a little piece of the miracle they had experienced, right there in front of everyone. The program aired, and in short time, thousands of people were moved by that woman who spoke from the heart, without complicated words, without exaggeration, only with the truth of someone who overcame the impossible. And she showed that even after the deepest darkness, there can still be light, there can still be love, there can still be life. Time passed. Paola grew up amid laughter, falls, hugs, and many videos lovingly recorded by Javier. Camila, despite all the difficulties, strove every day to be present for every little moment of her daughter's life, every new smile, every babbling word, every curious glance at the world. It was a victory she celebrated silently, her heart full of gratitude. That sunny morning, the living room seemed even brighter. Paola, now 2 years old, was trying to stand up without support, balancing her little body and laughing at her own attempts. Ernesto smiled. Javier, sitting on the sofa with his cell phone in his hands, recorded everything as always. Camila was kneeling on the rug, arms open, waiting for her daughter. "Come on, my love. Come to mommy," she called out in a sweet voice full of hope. Paola looked straight ahead, with the determined gaze of someone who has more courage than her size. She took a step, wobbled, then another, until she let go of the chair and, laughing, ran clumsily toward Ernesto. She stopped, smiling, and turned toward Camila. Camila opened her arms even wider, her heart about to burst out of her chest. When Paola arrived, she threw herself into her mother's arms with all the strength that a small body could have. Camila hugged her tightly, her face pressed against her daughter's soft hair, her eyes already filled with tears. And then came the most beautiful gift. Paola, with her small but confident voice, said for the first time, "Mama." Camila burst into tears. She was crying with happiness, feeling that all the broken pieces inside her were coming back together in that embrace. Javier dropped his cell phone and ran to hug them. Ernesto stood watching. The whole house seemed to breathe along with that scene, as if even the walls knew how important that moment was. A few days later, the family decided to celebrate in a special way. They returned to the square where it had all begun. The same bench, the same smell of flowers in the air, the same wind ruffling their hair. Camila held Paola's hand, while Javier walked on the other side, with that smile that seemed to never have left. They sat on the grass, Paola playing with flowers, and Camila looked at the blue sky, breathing deeply. That sky was the same as the day she met Javier, but now she saw it differently. Now she carried within her the certainty that nothing in life is impossible when there is love. Camila took Javier's hand, squeezed it affectionately, and in a low voice, almost a whisper, said, "Thank you for not letting go of me." He smiled, squeezing her hand too, without needing to say anything. Paola laughed beside them, trying to catch a butterfly that was flying by. And so, in that simple moment, in that square full of memories, the family was complete again. Not perfect, not as before, but even stronger, even more alive, and deeply united by something that no pain could destroy. The love that never let go, even in the most difficult days. Which moment in this miraculous story affected you the most? Write your thoughts in the comments, like the video, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for similar real-life stories.